You ever feel like the mountains are watching you? Not just the trees, not just the silence. I mean something deeper, older, hiding in those ridges like it's waiting for the right person to step off the trail. That's what the Appalachian Mountains feel like. They don't welcome you, they test you. And I learned that the hard way. It started 2 summers ago when I decided to take a solo trip. No phone signal, no company, just me and the mountains. I thought I was chasing peace. Turns out, I was walking straight into one of the darkest secrets those woods ever held. I remember the moment the road turned from gravel to dirt. My GPS froze, the screen went blank, and all I could hear was my tires crunching under me. I should have turned around, but the air smelled clean and wild, and something about the quiet pulled me deeper in. Locals had told me not to camp near Carter's Hollow. Bad luck sticks to that place, one old man said, tapping the rim of his coffee cup in the gas station diner. People go there and hear their own voices calling back at them. I laughed it off. Superstitions. Mountain talk. But when you're alone out there, superstition starts to sound a lot like common sense you didn't listen to. The first night, I set up my tent near a clearing. Tall pines, the distant hum of crickets, the smell of wet soil. I recorded a few clips for my trip journal, talking about how calm everything felt. That was the last video on my phone that made any sense. Around midnight, the forest stopped. You know that sound when a storm is coming, how everything goes, still. Like the world's holding its breath. That's what it felt like. I opened my eyes, heart pounding, listening for wind or rain or anything. Nothing. Then I heard footsteps, not animal sounds, human, slow, crunch, crunch, crunch. I whispered, "Who's there?" But my voice cracked halfway through. Silence. Then from behind my tent came my own voice. "Who's there?" I froze. Every hair on my body stood up. The voice was mine. Same tone, same crack in the middle. I scrambled for my flashlight and unzipped the tent, my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip the zipper. The beam of light cut through the trees. Nothing but fog and shadows. But the air felt crowded, like someone was standing right next to me. "Stop it," I said. And the voice, my voice, whispered back, "Stop it." I backed away, stumbled over my sleeping bag and hit the dirt. The flashlight flickered and died. I fumbled for my phone, desperate for light, for sound, for something human. That's when I noticed the smell, damp earth and iron. I thought maybe I'd cut myself, but the scent was coming from the woods. It was heavy, metallic, choking, and then I saw it, a figure standing just beyond the fog line, still, silent, but shaped like me, same height, same posture. "Hey!" I shouted, but the thing didn't move. I took a step forward, and so did it. Every rational part of my brain screamed, it's a trick of the light. Reflection, pareidolia, anything logical. But my gut knew better. I packed my things in less than a minute. No sleeping bag, no firelight, just pure panic, and ran toward the dirt road. My flashlight flickered back on just long enough to catch something carved into a tree trunk beside my path. "You're not alone in your skin." I didn't stop running until I reached my car. When I looked back through the trees, there were more of them. Shapes that looked like me standing shoulder to shoulder in the mist. I drove until sunrise, until the mountains turned gold and the road widened again. When I finally stopped at a diner hours later, I went to the restroom to splash my face. I looked up at the mirror, and for half a second my reflection didn't move. I blinked, and it blinked a second later. I don't go to the Appalachians anymore, but sometimes when I stand near a mirror and the house is quiet, I swear I hear footsteps. Slow, crunch, crunch, like something still trying to follow me out of those woods. I used to think silence was peaceful, but in the mountains, silence means something's listening. It was supposed to be a quick detour, a scenic route through the southern ridge, 30 miles off the main highway. The locals called it Old Turner's Pass. I hadn't planned to stop, but the road curved into a fog so thick it felt alive, like it wanted to keep me there. The air smelled of wet leaves and iron again, a smell I hadn't noticed since my last trip into these hills. I told myself it was memory playing tricks, but my chest tightened all the same. I rolled down the window. "Hello?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by fog. Then came the whisper. Not loud, not clear. Just behind me, I spun around, no one in the back seat. Only my reflection in the rearview mirror, pale and wide-eyed. I told myself I was tired, that fog bends sound, that I should just keep driving. But 100 yards ahead, something flickered. A lantern. It hung from a post on the side of the road, burning with a thin, cold flame, blue, not orange. I slowed down, squinting through the mist. Beside the lantern stood an old wooden sign. "Welcome to Harker Cabin, Eston, 1891. There was no cabin, only the sign and that impossible light swaying in the breeze. I don't know why I stopped the car. Curiosity feels different up there. It doesn't come from you. It pulls you. Like the mountain itself wants to show you something. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the mist. Every crunch of gravel under my boots sounded too loud. The forest on both sides was still. Even the insects refused to make a sound. I reached the lantern. It didn't burn like any flame I'd seen. It hissed softly, blue smoke curling up into nothing. Beneath it, half buried in moss, was a small metal box. Rusted shut. I brushed the dirt away and the ground trembled, just a shiver like something shifting deep below. I froze. The sound came again, not from the earth but from inside the fog. Tap, pause, tap, tap. It wasn't random. It was a rhythm. Like someone knocking, waiting for me to answer. I whispered, "Hello?" No reply. Only another tap, 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 closer this time. I turned my light toward the sound and saw outlines moving between the trees. Too tall for deer, too narrow for bears. They didn't walk, they glided, the way smoke moves when you exhale in cold air. My heart kicked against my ribs. I stepped back toward the car, keeping the beam steady. "Who's out there?" I called. The knocking stopped. Then softly a woman's voice, tired, cracked, whispered, "We keep it here so they don't find it." I froze. Keep what? No answer. Only the slow return of tapping, this time right behind me. I spun around. Nothing. But the box, the rusted metal box, was gone. Panic hit me so hard I almost dropped the flashlight. I turned back to the car, ready to bolt, when I saw the lantern light fade to black. Total darkness swallowed the road. Then in the distance a door creaked open. Wooden, heavy, but there was still no cabin. Just a doorway standing in the middle of the fog, frame and hinges hanging in mid-air. From inside it came that blue glow again, flickering like underwater fire. And I heard them. Whispers overlapping, hundreds of them, all saying the same thing in tones that rose and fell like breathing. "Don't let them out. I couldn't move. My body felt caught between two instincts, run or look closer. Curiosity won again. I stepped toward the door. The ground beneath me hummed, a low vibration crawling up through my boots, through my legs, until it reached my chest. The closer I got, the colder it became. When I reached for the frame, the wood wasn't solid. It was soft, pulsing, like skin stretched too tight. I yanked my hand back, heart racing. The whispers stopped. Silence again. Then one voice right next to my ear breathed, "It's open now." The door burst with light, blinding blue-white, cold enough to burn. I stumbled backward, shielding my eyes. The light pulsed once, twice, then vanished completely. The door was gone. The lantern gone. The fog lifted like someone had turned off a machine. I was standing on the empty road, my flashlight the only light left. I ran. I don't remember driving, only that the tires screamed against the turns and I didn't stop until I saw the highway signs again. I told myself it was exhaustion, a hallucination, but when I stopped for gas a few hours later, the attendant glanced at my hands. "You been painting?" he asked. I looked down. My fingers were stained faint blue. I scrubbed them raw in the restroom sink. The color didn't fade for 3 days. Later that week, I tried to find Harker Cabin online. Nothing. No records, no history, not even an old property listing. But buried deep in an old Appalachian folklore archive, I found one note. Harker Cabin once stood along Turner's Pass. The family vanished in 1891. Locals claimed they built a door to nowhere, a doorway to keep what whispers from escaping the hills. The cabin burned the same night. The door was never found. Sometimes when fog rolls down my street back home, I smell that faint metallic tang again, and my phone screen flickers with a blue glow before shutting off. I don't go near old roads anymore, because whatever was locked behind that door on Turner's Pass. I hadn't planned to talk about this next part. Even now, just remembering it makes my chest tighten. It wasn't a ghost story, not really. It was worse. It was the kind of thing that makes you question what reality feels like when the woods decide to twist it around you. It started with a sound. A single sharp knock. I was staying in a ranger cabin halfway up the Appalachian Trail, a temporary posting helping with off-season maintenance. Nothing fancy. One room, wood stove, creaky floorboards, and a radio that barely worked when it wanted to. The nearest town was 15 miles down a winding dirt road. I'd gone days without seeing another person. The knock came just after midnight. 1, 2, 3, slow and deliberate. I thought it was the wind at first until it came again, louder. "Hello?" I called out. My voice cracked in the silence. Nothing answered. The temperature had dropped so suddenly my breath fogged in the air. I pulled on my jacket and opened the door, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through the dark, but there was no one there. Just the tree line, dense and black, the shadows layered so deep they looked alive. I stepped outside, listening. Nothing but the faint groan of the mountain shifting under frost. Then I heard it again, this time from the right side of the cabin. 3 knocks. Steady. I swung the light that way and froze. There were handprints. 5 of them, pressed into the glass of the side window. They weren't smeared or messy, but perfectly outlined, like someone had leaned there quietly watching. Except the prints were small, child-sized, and they were on the inside. My stomach dropped. I backed away from the window, scanning the room. The door had been locked. The single window bolted shut. I checked under the cot inside the small closet. Nothing. No sign of entry. I tried to laugh it off, told myself it must have been there before I arrived. But when I wiped at one of the prints with my sleeve, the mark smudged fresh. I barely slept that night. The sound came again just before dawn, 3 knocks from beneath the floorboards this time. I felt the vibration through the cot, through my boots on the wooden floor. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer, just that slow, rhythmic tapping. Then it stopped, and a soft sound replaced it, like someone exhaling under the floor. The next morning I hiked down to the old supply shed, hoping for distraction. Inside, beneath a pile of rotted tarps, I found a journal. Mold had eaten the edges, but I could still make out the first line. Cabin 3B, don't answer the knocks. There were entries dated years apart, all from rangers who'd stayed in that same cabin. They wrote about hearing tapping from the walls, whispers under the floor, voices that sounded like children asking to come in. One line near the end made me sit down right there on the dusty floor. If you hear 3 knocks, wait. If you hear 6, it's already inside. I told myself it was just folklore, some long-running prank passed down to spook the new guys. But that night, when the sun dipped behind the ridge, I noticed something strange. The forest was silent again. No wind, no crickets. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until your own heartbeat sounds too loud. At exactly midnight, it came back. 3 knocks, then 3 more. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The journal's words echoed in my head. If you hear 6, I counted again, hoping I'd misheard. But then came the slow drag of a hand across the wall. Fingernails scraping wood. I grabbed my flashlight and turned it on, but the beam flickered weakly and died. The radio on the table hissed, crackled, then whispered something faint. A voice too soft to make out, looping the same word over and over. I leaned close. It sounded like my name. My skin prickled. I yanked the plug out of the wall, but the whispering continued, now directly behind me. I turned slowly. There was a shape standing near the door. Small, still, its outline barely visible in the moonlight filtering through the cracked window. It didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there, head tilted slightly to one side. I whispered, "Who are you?" It took a step forward. My throat closed, then the sound came. That same 3 knocks, but this time from inside the walls, echoing all around the room like the cabin itself was answering. The air felt heavy, like the whole space was shrinking around me. I backed toward the window, ready to smash it open. But when I looked through the glass, there were more figures outside. 4, 5, maybe 6 of them, all standing perfectly still, facing the cabin. The nearest one tilted its head, mirroring the thing inside. I turned back, and the figure was gone. I don't remember breaking the window. I don't remember the run down the trail, the branches slapping at my face, the feeling of being followed. I just remember the sound that chased me through the dark. 3 knocks, echoing through the trees. I didn't stop running until the sky began to lighten and the road came into view. I flagged down a trucker who nearly swerved off the road when he saw me. He said I looked like I'd been running for miles. I asked him what time it was. He said it was 2:07 a.m. I had left the cabin at midnight, 2 hours unaccounted for. I never went back for my things. A week later, I got a call from the ranger's office. They said the cabin had burned down during a storm. Lightning, they thought. I asked if anyone had gone in after. The dispatcher hesitated. They found footprints, she said. Dozens of them. Bare, small. I still hear it sometimes when I can't sleep. A faint tapping at the base of the wall, just below the floor. 3 knocks. Then silence. I keep telling myself it's the pipes. But deep down, I know the sound of knuckles on wood. I never believed in places remembering people. I thought the land just existed, cold, unmoved, unaware of who walked on it. But that changed the night I went back to where my father disappeared. It had been 17 years since he vanished on a survey job in the lower Appalachian range. The report said he'd wandered off during a storm, lost his footing, and never came back. They found his gear days later. Radio crushed, compass cracked, but no trace of him. Not a footprint, not a bone. My mother refused to talk about it. She sold the house and moved north, far from the hills, but I couldn't leave it alone. Every October, the same dream came. My father standing at the tree line, rain dripping from his coat, whispering something I couldn't quite hear. Then lightning would flash and he'd be gone again. This year, I decided to go back. The coordinates from his old field log led me deep into the Blue Hollow area, a section of forest that doesn't even appear on most maps. I parked near an old ranger gate and started walking just before dusk, flashlight and recorder in hand. By the time I reached the ridge, fog had rolled in thick and heavy. The trail faded into mud and the trees leaned inward like they were trying to listen. I turned on the recorder. "Day 1, I said softly, following the original grid toward marker 6. "Visibility's poor." Somewhere ahead, something answered. Not words, just the faint, hollow echo of my own voice, following the original grid. I stopped. The fog shifted like it was breathing. I replayed the recording. Nothing there, just my words, my voice. I told myself it was echo, a trick of sound, but my pulse said otherwise. A mile in, I found it, a clearing, circular, unnaturally so. The ground was flattened in the center, the dirt dark and damp. My flashlight picked up a glint of metal sticking from the soil. It was his compass, the same one I remembered from when I was a kid, the lid engraved with his initials. RM. I knelt down and brushed the dirt away, but the second my fingers touched the metal, the woods went silent. The air changed, not colder, just heavier, charged like before a thunderclap. I stood up slowly, feeling watched. "Dad?" I said, half whisper, no answer. But behind me twigs snapped. I turned, light sweeping the trees. Nothing moved, but the mist had thickened into shapes, thin, vertical, almost human. I started backing toward the path, trying to breathe quietly. Then the recorder in my pocket clicked on by itself, static first, then a faint voice under it, rough, low, breaking apart with distance. "Leave it." My throat went dry. I yanked the recorder out, hit stop, and shoved it deep in my pack. The trail was gone, completely swallowed by fog. I spun in a slow circle, trying to find my bearings, but every direction looked the same. I pulled out my compass. The needle spun in lazy circles, directionless. Something rustled again, closer this time. The sound wasn't random. It moved in a circle around me, slow and deliberate, as if pacing. I whispered, "Who's there?" The air shifted. My flashlight flickered. Then the fog directly in front of me peeled open like curtains, revealing a narrow path I swear hadn't been there before. I followed it, because what else was there to do? The path wound downhill until it ended at what looked like an old mine entrance, boarded shut. Every instinct screamed to turn around, but I heard it then. A single word whispered so close it felt like breath on my ear. "Help." My knees almost buckled. The voice was his, my father's. I ran to the boards and shone the light through the cracks. Darkness. But under it, faintly, I saw movement. A flicker of reflection, like eyes catching the beam. "Dad?" I called. The reflection vanished. Then from deep inside came a slow tapping like knuckles against stone. Once, twice, then a pause. "Are you there?" I whispered. The tapping continued, now joined by something else. The faintest hum, low and vibrating. A sound that seemed to crawl through the ground into my shoes. Up through my legs, I pressed my ear against the wood. It wasn't humming. It was breathing. I stumbled back, tripping on a root, my flashlight clattering to the ground. When I picked it up again, the boards on the mine were gone. The opening yawned black and empty, and from that blackness my father's voice spoke again. Only now it didn't sound quite human. "Come see what I found." The words weren't wrong, but the rhythm was. Too careful, too even, like something practicing speech rather than speaking it. My mouth went dry. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. The fog began to move, slow and coiling, crawling into the tunnel as if it were being drawn in by breath. I whispered, "Where are you?" The voice came again, closer. "Here." A faint light flickered deep in the tunnel. Blue-white, like a lantern's flame underwater. Against every ounce of reason I had left, I stepped closer. My light barely reached a few feet ahead, but I saw the floor slope down into darkness. My boots sank slightly. Not mud, but something softer, like soil that hadn't been disturbed in decades. The air was thick and sour. My chest burned with each breath. Then I saw it. A shape on the ground, a man's coat torn and half buried. I knelt, my hands shaking as I brushed the dirt away. The fabric was old but familiar. I reached for the pocket and pulled out a metal badge, half-rusted, engraved with the same initials, RM. I wanted to cry. I wanted to feel something like closure, but before I could stand, I felt it. The faintest pressure on my shoulder, fingers cold and too long, resting there as lightly as air. I turned slowly. The light behind me was gone. The tunnel was pitch black, but I could still feel the shape leaning close, its breath warm against my ear. Then softly, "You found it." I don't remember running. I don't remember how I got back to the clearing. 1 second, I was in the mine, and the next, I was on the ground beside the compass, gasping for air. The fog had lifted completely. My pack was open, the recorder on top. The red light blinked, still recording. I pressed play. Static filled the air, then faint whispering. Layered voices that weren't mine. Then one, clear as day. "Now you'll remember us too." I turned the device off and threw it into the river that ran alongside the trail. When I got back to my car, the passenger seat was damp, rainwater I thought, but on the window, drawn in the condensation, were 5 letters traced by a finger, RM. That was 6 months ago. I haven't gone back since, but sometimes when the air gets cold enough, I wake up to the sound of tapping on my window, and in the reflection, just for a moment, I see his face, smiling. I used to think silence was peace. That quiet meant safety. But after what happened in those mountains, I know now that silence is sometimes the loudest warning you'll ever get. It started with a sound, a small one. Barely there, a single chime carried on the wind. I'd been hiking for hours, following an old map that marked a ridge called Whistler's Hollow. Locals said it was cursed. The kind of place where voices echoed too long and footsteps followed you even when you stopped walking. I didn't believe in that. Not until I heard the bell. At first, I thought it was from one of those goat collars. There were wild ones in the region, right? But it came again, soft and distant, like it was drifting just behind the next rise. Then again, a little closer, there was no wind, no movement in the trees. Just that faint metallic ting cutting through the air, rhythmic and careful, as if it knew I was listening. I turned off my phone flashlight, letting my eyes adjust to the dark. The forest looked wrong. The branches leaned at angles that didn't make sense. Roots twisting out of the soil like something underneath was pushing upward. That was when I saw it. A light, faint and golden, flickering through the trees. It wasn't the sharp white of a flashlight or the warm orange of a campfire. It was something in between. I should have turned back. Every instinct told me to. but I couldn't. There was something hypnotic about it, like the light itself was pulling me forward. The trail narrowed until it disappeared completely, and the air smelled different, old like damp stone and rust. Then just ahead I saw the source of the glow. It was a cabin, small, wooden, barely holding itself together. The windows were covered with black cloth, but from the cracks I could see that strange gold light bleeding through. The bell sound stopped. I waited, holding my breath, half expecting someone to step out. No one did, but then a second sound replaced it, whispering. Not words, not really, just the soft rise and fall of something trying to sound like language. I stepped closer, my boots crunching on gravel. The whispering stopped instantly, replaced by another sound. Creak, creak, creak. The door was swaying open, slowly, as if breathing. I should have run. But curiosity has a way of drowning out common sense when you're alone and scared. I raised my flashlight and pushed the door open all the way. The inside was empty, mostly. Dust floated in thick columns through the air, furniture covered with sheets, but the light wasn't coming from any lamp or candle. It was coming from the walls themselves, faintly glowing through old, yellowed wood. And then on the far wall I saw them, symbols carved deep into the boards, each one surrounded by a faint shimmer. Like heat waves, the air buzzed faintly, almost like static. I stepped closer, drawn to the largest symbol, a circle with jagged lines radiating outward. My hand lifted without thinking. The moment my fingers brushed the wood, a whisper slipped directly into my ear. Too close to be possible. Finally, I spun around. No one was there. The door was closed. That was when I realized the room had changed. The light wasn't gold anymore. It was dim red, pulsing slowly in sync with my heartbeat. I went for the door. The handle was warm, then burning. I jerked my hand away, and a low groan came from the ceiling, the sound of wood under pressure. "Who's there?" I shouted. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the heavy air. Then, the bell, once, just once, from directly above me. I looked up. There was a crawl space hatch in the ceiling, hanging slightly open. A thin rope dangled down from it, swaying gently. I didn't want to look. Every part of me screamed not to, but I had to. I climbed onto a chair, reached up, and pushed the hatch open. Something fell out, not a person, not an animal. Just a bundle of rags tied around a small wooden bell like a charm. It hit the floor with a soft thud and rolled toward the symbols on the wall. The light flickered. Then slowly one of the symbols began to shift, not fade, move. The lines rearranged themselves, forming something new. I stepped back as the whispering started again, this time louder, layered, as if 100 voices were murmuring at once. I couldn't tell if it was coming from the walls or inside my head. Then, from somewhere deep within the cabin, came a single word: stay. The sound wasn't loud, but it vibrated through the floorboards, through my chest, through everything. I ran for the door again, and this time it opened. Not easily, but enough. Cold air rushed in and the whispering cut off instantly. I stumbled outside, gasping, lightheaded. The forest looked different. The trees were closer together, the path gone. And when I looked back, the cabin was gone too. Just trees, just fog. But I wasn't alone. Something was standing between the trunks, too still to be human. It didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched. Its outline was wrong, tall, narrow, its shoulders uneven like they'd been broken and set the wrong way. I blinked, and it was gone. I don't remember much after that. I just remember walking, for hours, maybe longer. Every few minutes I'd hear that same chime again, never near, never far. Just enough to remind me it was following. By the time I found the road, the sun was rising. My car was parked right where I left it, but something about it made me freeze. Hanging from the rearview mirror was the same wooden bell. No rope. Just balanced there, swaying slightly, though there was no wind. I took it down and threw it into the woods as hard as I could. It disappeared into the trees. The sound came again, one last ting, like it had landed exactly where it wanted to be. When I got home, I tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, dehydration, paranoia, anything. But that night, when I went to bed, I woke up around 3 a.m. to a faint sound outside my window, that same chime. Once, then silence. I haven't been back to the Appalachians since, but sometimes when the wind is still, I swear I can hear that soft metallic note again, not in the distance, but somewhere inside the house, and when it rings, all the lights flicker for just a second, like something's waiting for me. You ever get that feeling that something's waiting for you, quietly, patiently, just beyond the edge of what you can see? That's what it felt like when I stumbled on that old trail marker in the middle of the Appalachians. It wasn't supposed to be there. I'd been following a mapped route, a clear one, but that marker looked ancient, older than the trees around it. The wood was blackened, carved with strange lines that didn't look like language. I remember thinking it was probably just an old boundary post, but the air around it felt different, still thick, like the forest was holding its breath. And then, faintly, I heard humming. It was soft, low, steady, coming from somewhere up ahead. It didn't sound threatening, just human, gentle, the kind of tune someone might hum to pass the time. But that's what made it worse. There shouldn't have been anyone out there. I walked toward the sound, without really deciding to. Each step made the ground feel softer, almost spongy, like the earth was soaked but hadn't rained. The humming got louder, clearer. It wasn't a melody I recognized, just the same few notes, looping endlessly, rising and falling with the wind. When I turned a corner, I saw a small cabin nestled between two pines. Smoke drifted from the chimney. It looked warm, welcoming even, like something out of an old postcard. But the humming was coming from inside, and it didn't pause, not even when I stepped closer. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the trees. The humming stopped. For a moment, everything went silent. Then the door creaked open just slightly, and that same humming started again. But this time it was lower, slower, almost like whoever was making it was smiling while they did. I took a step back. I didn't mean to. The door swung wider with a sudden groan. The cabin was dim inside, the light from the doorway spilling across the floorboards. There was no one there. Just a rocking chair, swaying gently back and forth. The humming was coming from the chair. I know that doesn't make sense, but it's the truth. The sound wasn't echoing from somewhere else, it was right there, filling the room like it had been waiting for me. My hands were shaking as I reached for the door frame. "Anyone here?" I whispered. The rocking stopped instantly, the humming too, and then something whispered back. Not a voice exactly, more like a breath against my ear. A single word, soft enough to almost miss. "Sit." I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my teeth. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. It was like my body wasn't mine anymore. I don't know why, but I stepped inside. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of old wood and something faintly sweet, like flowers left too long in a vase. I sat down on the chair. The wood groaned under me, and then slowly it started rocking on its own. The humming returned. Only this time it came from behind me. I turned around fast, but there was nothing there. Just a window with curtains that barely moved. The light outside was dimming fast, though I could have sworn the sun was still high when I found the cabin. The hum grew deeper, closer, almost like someone was leaning in right beside my ear. My skin prickled all over. I could feel breath that wasn't mine. Then I heard it. Soft, measured footsteps coming from the other side of the room. They were slow, careful. The kind of walk you use when you don't want to startle something. But when I looked, there was no one. The steps stopped. The chair stopped, and from the far wall, I heard the faintest sound, wood cracking, like something pushing through it. The boards began to bend inward, splintering ever so slightly. A shadow spilled through, stretching across the floor toward me. I stood up so fast the chair fell over. My breath caught in my throat. The air felt electric, thick enough to choke on. And then, from the corner of the room came that voice again. Stay. It was soft, almost pleading this time. I backed toward the door, my hand fumbling for the handle. When I touched it, the humming stopped again. Everything went dead silent. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Then I pulled the door open and the forest outside was gone. Not gone exactly, but different. The trees were the same shapes, but the light was wrong. Too dark for afternoon, too blue for evening. The air smelled sharp, metallic, like rain on stone. But there was no sky, just shadow all the way up. Behind me, the cabin groaned again. I ran. Branches whipped against my arms as I pushed through the dark. I could still hear the humming, but now it came from everywhere. High, low, near, far. The notes trailed me like something alive. Eventually, I burst through a clearing. The sky was back, gray, pale, real. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop until I saw my car parked at the trailhead. It felt impossible. Like I'd walked for minutes, but somehow hours had passed. When I got in, I saw something sitting on the passenger seat, a small music box made of old pine, carved with the same strange markings as that trail post. I hadn't brought it there. I knew I hadn't. Against every instinct, I opened the lid. The same tune began to play, the exact one I'd heard in the cabin. Only now, beneath it, I could hear something faint. A whispering, just under the melody. It wasn't words this time. It was laughter. I snapped the box shut and threw it into the woods. Then I drove. I didn't stop for gas, didn't eat, didn't even look in the mirrors. That night, when I finally reached home, I sat in the driveway for almost an hour, trying to convince myself none of it had happened. That it was the dark, the isolation, the exhaustion, anything but what it felt like. I went inside, locked the door, tried to sleep. But somewhere around 2 a.m., I woke up to that same sound, soft, familiar. The music box, playing downstairs. I didn't move for a long time. I just listened. The tune played slow and deliberate, each note sinking deeper into me. Then it stopped, and a voice whispered through the dark, gentle and close enough to touch. Sit. That was 3 months ago. I moved cities, changed my number, stopped going anywhere near the woods. But every so often, when the world goes quiet enough, I can hear that faint tune again, so soft it feels like it's coming from inside my head. The last time it happened, I turned toward the window. Someone had written a single word into the condensation on the glass. Stay. I blinked, and it was gone, but the air still smelled faintly of pine, and somewhere in the house I swear I heard wood creak, slow, steady, like an old chair starting to rock again. It started with a knock. Not loud, not frantic, just a steady, deliberate knock at my front door. 3 sharp taps that sounded too polite to be threatening, but too out of place to ignore. It was just past midnight, and the only light in my cabin came from the dying fire in the hearth. The first thing I thought was that it must be a ranger, maybe warning me about a coming storm. The second thought was worse, that no one should know I was out there. I hadn't told a soul. I'd rented the cabin last minute, deep in the Appalachian backcountry, because I wanted to be alone. I needed the silence. But when I opened the door, there was no one. Only the sound of wind pushing through the trees, whispering in a low hum. The clearing was empty. I leaned out just enough to see the steps, the porch, the thin trail of dirt leading back into the woods. Nothing moved. Then came the knock again. This time it sounded from behind me. Inside the cabin, I turned so fast I nearly slipped. My breath caught in my throat. The fire popped once, scattering sparks across the floor. But the sound hadn't come from the hearth. It came from the back wall, near the narrow hallway that led to the single bedroom. I didn't move for nearly a minute. I just stared into that dark hall, half expecting something to step out, but it didn't. The silence stretched until I could hear my own pulse echoing in my ears. I forced myself to laugh. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe the cabin was old enough to creak in strange ways. I told myself that even as my hands shook. I closed the door and locked it, sliding the bolt home with a soft metallic click. Then I turned back toward the hall. Hello? No answer. Just the faint groan of the timbers as the cabin settled. I took one slow step forward. Then another. My shadow stretched long against the floorboards, flickering with the dying firelight. At the end of the hall, the bedroom door was cracked open. I didn't remember leaving it like that. When I reached it, I pushed gently. The hinges let out a long, low creak that felt too loud in the silence. The room was empty. My suitcase sat on the bed, half unpacked. The small lamp on the nightstand glowed dimly, its bulb buzzing with a faint static hum. And then I noticed something I hadn't before. A small mirror hanging opposite the bed. It wasn't clean. The surface was warped, scratched in strange circular patterns, like someone had dragged their fingers across it again and again. I stepped closer. My reflection shimmered faintly, distorted by the scratches. And just behind me in the reflection, I saw something move, a shape. I spun around, heart slamming in my chest. But the room was empty. The hall was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, it showed only me. But for a split second, just as I turned away, I thought I saw another pair of eyes behind mine. I didn't sleep that night. Every few minutes I heard faint tapping from somewhere inside the walls, like nails on wood, slow and deliberate. By dawn, my nerves were shot. I told myself I'd leave that morning. I packed fast, shoving clothes into my bag, not bothering to fold anything. But when I went to open the front door, the knob wouldn't turn. It wasn't jammed. It wasn't locked. It just wouldn't move. The key clicked uselessly. I tried the windows, same thing. They looked normal. But when I tried to lift them, they felt solid, unmoving, as if they were part of the wall. And then softly came the knocking again, from the mirror. It was faint, but I heard it. 3 slow taps. I turned toward the bedroom. My skin prickled with cold, even though the fire was still burning. The mirror trembled slightly on the wall, the sound echoing from deep inside it, like something was behind the glass, trying to get out. I grabbed my coat and moved toward the door again, wrenching at the knob. Nothing. My breath quickened. And then, just for a moment, the air changed. It got warmer. Not comforting warm, but suffocating. Thick. Still. The fire flickered once, then went out completely, and from somewhere near the hallway, I heard breathing, slow, even too close. I couldn't tell where it came from, only that it was moving, sliding along the wall, from one side of the cabin to the other. Then the floor creaked under a soft, deliberate step. I held my breath. My fingers tightened around the flashlight in my pocket. I switched it on, the beam cutting through the dark, shaking slightly with my hands. The sound stopped. Then a whisper came, almost kind, almost familiar. "You shouldn't have looked." My stomach dropped. I backed toward the far wall, flashlight shaking over the floorboards. "Who's there?" The whisper came again, closer now, right beside my ear. "You shouldn't have looked." The light flickered. For a moment, I saw something move like the air itself, rippling. A shape, dark and undefined, sliding along the edge of the beam. I swung the light around wildly. Nothing. Just the door, still shut tight. Then I heard the knock one more time. Not from the mirror this time, but from inside the wall, inches from where I stood. Slow. Deliberate. I pressed my back against the wood, the cold sinking through my coat. And just as I did, I felt it, something tapping back from the other side, matching my heartbeat perfectly. Tap, tap, tap. The sound grew faster as my pulse raced. I forced myself away from the wall and stumbled back toward the living room. The air buzzed faintly, the way it does before lightning strikes. Then, for the first time, I saw it. The mirror's reflection stretched across the hallway floor like a shadow that didn't belong. It shimmered faintly, as if the glass had spilled out onto the wood. Inside that reflection, I could see movement, arms, faces, shapes twisting like they were underwater. And all at once, I understood what the knocking was. It wasn't someone asking to be let in. It was something asking if I wanted out. I didn't think. I just ran for the back door, slammed into it so hard my shoulder burned, and it burst open like it had never been stuck at all. Cold mountain air hit me like a wave. I didn't stop to look back. I ran down the trail until my lungs ached, and the cabin was nothing but a memory behind me. I made it back to my car, breathless and shaking. My hands barely worked the keys. When I finally got it started, I looked up and froze. In the rearview mirror behind my reflection, I saw the cabin door wide open. And in that doorway, faint but clear, something was standing there, swaying slightly, watching me leave. The drive back to town was a blur. I couldn't tell if it was fog or something else that followed me through those winding roads, always just behind. Too faint to see, too real to dismiss. When I got home that night, I checked every mirror in my house. Just a precaution, I told myself. But when I reached the bathroom, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. 3 small, perfect fingerprints on the glass, dark smudges, as though someone had pressed their hand against it from the inside. I wiped them away. They came back the next morning. That was 2 weeks ago. Every night since, I've heard the same thing. 3 knocks, faint but deliberate, echoing through the quiet. I've stopped checking where they come from. I already know. They're coming from behind the glass, and lately when I catch my reflection at night, I swear it smiles before I do. It's strange how silence can have a sound of its own. After what happened with the cabin, I thought leaving the mountains would free me from whatever I'd stumbled into. But silence followed me, thick, heavy, like fog that never lifts. The city was supposed to be loud, comforting, but even here the quiet found me. It crept into the corners of my apartment, waited in the dark spaces between the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. Every night just before I drifted off it came. 3 soft knocks, always the same rhythm. Always too quiet to be certain, but too distinct to ignore. I tried to convince myself it was my neighbors, the pipes, anything ordinary. But deep down I knew the sound didn't belong to this place. It had followed me. The first week I ignored it. I didn't look at mirrors after dark, didn't turn toward the sound when it came. But by the second week I couldn't help it. The knock came again, closer this time. It echoed through the hallway, then faded into the air like it had never been there at all. I remember standing in the middle of my living room, barefoot on the cold floor, holding my breath and listening. The lights flickered once. The air conditioner hummed to life, but underneath it all I heard a faint whisper, almost too soft to catch. "Are you awake?" My chest tightened. The voice wasn't loud, but it was so close it might as well have been inside the room with me. I turned slowly toward the hallway mirror, the same one I'd covered days ago with an old bed sheet. The cloth moved slightly, like a slow breath beneath fabric. I didn't go near it, not that night. The next morning I found the sheet on the floor. The mirror was uncovered again. At first glance it looked normal, but as I moved closer I noticed something strange. The reflection was a second behind. Not by much, just a fraction, like a lag in a video feed. When I raised my hand, my reflection hesitated, then followed. It felt like it was watching me, not mimicking me. I taped cardboard over it that day. By the third night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound became a warning. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of air through the vents made me flinch. My thoughts began to unravel. What if it wasn't the mirror? What if it was me? I kept remembering that whisper. "Are you awake?" The question replayed in my mind until I couldn't tell if I'd actually heard it or just dreamed it. Then came the tapping. Not from the mirror this time. From the walls. It started faint, barely audible, like water dripping through the pipes. Then it grew more deliberate, measured, rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. I pressed my ear against the drywall. The sound came from inside, between the studs, where nothing should move. It followed me, shifting from wall to wall as if something was crawling just out of sight, tracing my movements through the apartment. That was when I decided to leave. I called a friend, an old college buddy named Aaron, who lived a few hours away. He didn't ask many questions, just told me I could stay with him for a while. I packed what I could fit in my car and left before dawn, but as I reached the parking lot, I saw it again. In the reflection of my car window behind me stood my reflection, but it wasn't doing what I was doing. It wasn't opening the car door. It was standing perfectly still, head slightly tilted, as if it was listening for something. I slammed the door shut and drove. The mountains were miles away, but I could still see them on the horizon as the sun rose, a dark, uneven silhouette cutting through the fog. I thought of the cabin, the mirror, the whispers. I told myself it was just the isolation, just my mind playing tricks. But the knocks didn't stop. Even in Aaron's house, a neat little place in a quiet neighborhood, they found me. That first night, I stayed in the guest room. I didn't tell him about what had happened. I didn't want him to think I'd lost it. But when the clock struck 3 a.m., I woke to the same sound. 3 knocks. Soft. Intentional. They came from the window this time. I sat up, heart pounding, staring at the thin curtains. The street outside was still, bathed in the yellow glow of a single street lamp. I could just make out the faint outline of trees swaying in the wind. Then came another sound, faint scratching, like fingertips dragging down the glass. I didn't move. I just watched the curtain tremble slightly, as though someone was standing right outside. When I finally gathered the courage to look, I pulled the curtain aside and saw nothing. Nothing but the reflection of my own face in the dark glass, except my reflection's eyes were already open. I stumbled back, breath caught in my throat. My body moved, but in the glass, I didn't. My reflection stood perfectly still, eyes locked on mine, unblinking. And then, just before I looked away, its lips parted slightly. It mouthed something. I couldn't hear it, but I could read the words. "You can't leave." The next morning I tried to tell Aaron, but every time I started, the words tangled in my throat. How do you explain something like that? He noticed, though. He said I looked pale, exhausted. He offered me coffee, tried to make small talk. I nodded, pretended everything was fine, but I kept glancing at the window. At one point he asked, "You sure you're okay?" Before I could answer, there was a soft knock from somewhere behind us. We both froze. It came again. 3 knocks. Aaron frowned and went to the front door, thinking it was a neighbor or a package. I watched from the kitchen, every muscle tense. He opened it. No one there. The air in the house felt suddenly heavier, charged, like static before a storm. Aaron stepped outside, looked around, then came back in, shaking his head. Probably some kid messing around. But I saw it before the door shut, a faint handprint on the glass. From the inside, that night I didn't sleep. I kept the lights on, phone in hand, waiting for morning. Around 2:47 a.m., I felt the temperature drop. The air grew still. Then I heard it, barely audible, but there, breathing. It was slow, steady, right beside me. I turned my head just enough to see the mirror above the dresser. And there, in the reflection, I saw movement. A figure stood just behind my shoulder, blurry, like fog in human shape. No face, just the faint outline of a person leaning close as though to whisper. I blinked, and it was gone. But the whisper wasn't. It was everywhere now, in the hum of the lights, in the rustle of the air. Words I couldn't quite make out, overlapping, echoing, growing louder until it sounded like dozens of voices all murmuring at once. Then silence, and one clear voice cut through the rest, soft and almost sorrowful. "You brought it back." I turned toward the sound, but the room was empty. My reflection stared back, eyes wide, trembling, not with fear, but with recognition. Because I understood now. Whatever I'd heard in that cabin hadn't stayed there. It had attached itself to me, and mirrors weren't just glass. They were doors, thin places between what's seen and what's waiting to be seen. Since that night, I've avoided them completely. I covered every reflective surface, every screen, every piece of glass. But even then, sometimes, when the room goes quiet enough, I hear it. That faint, familiar tapping, tap, 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 and sometimes, in the dark, I feel a presence just behind me, waiting for me to look. It's patient. It doesn't rush. It knows I'll have to see eventually, because no matter where I go, city or mountain, silence or noise, my reflection is always with me. And lately, when I catch it by accident, just for a split second it looks tired, almost pleading, like it wants me to take its place. It started with a sound I couldn't place, not the usual creaks or settling of an old house. This was softer, more deliberate, like someone dragging their fingertips along the wood of my bedroom door. I froze, eyes fixed on the handle, breath caught halfway between waking and dreaming. For a few seconds the noise stopped. Then came the faintest whisper, almost too quiet to be real. "Are you still there?" The voice wasn't outside. It was right next to me, inside the room. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My mind raced through every possible explanation. Maybe the wind through the window frame. Maybe I was dreaming again. But something deep inside me already knew this wasn't a dream. When I finally turned my head toward the sound, the room looked completely normal. Moonlight spilled through the blinds in thin white bars, touching the edge of the mirror across from my bed. I hated that mirror. I'd covered it weeks ago, but the sheet had slipped during the night. That's when I saw it. Not movement, Not even a reflection, just wrongness. In the mirror, the room looked the same. Same bed, same moonlight, same walls. But in that reflection, my body wasn't lying where it should have been. My reflection was sitting up, staring straight at me. I remember the air in the room feeling heavy, thick, like breathing through smoke. The reflection's head tilted slightly, as though it was studying me. Then slowly it raised one finger to its lips. Shh! I blinked, and the image snapped back to normal, just me, lying there, heart pounding so hard it hurt. That night I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I watched the darkness stretch into morning, the shadows crawl across the walls until sunlight finally broke through. Only then did I get up and rip that mirror down, dragging it outside to the dumpster behind the building. But even as I walked away, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window of a parked car. My face, my eyes, but my mouth smiling when I wasn't. By that evening I was shaking. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys and drove with no destination. I just needed to move. I thought maybe if I kept driving the feeling would fade. But the further I went, the stranger things got. The roads twisted in ways they shouldn't have. Familiar landmarks disappeared. My GPS stopped working altogether. For a while I thought I'd somehow looped back into the mountains again, the same cursed, endless forest I swore I'd left behind. The sky darkened too quickly. Dusk bled into full night like a fast-forwarded film. I pulled over to catch my breath, the car idling in the middle of nowhere. No lights, no other vehicles, just the soft hum of the engine and the rhythmic pulse of my heartbeat in my ears. Then came the static. It crawled through the speakers, harsh, uneven, like a broken radio signal. I turned the volume down, but the noise stayed the same. It wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from inside the car. I leaned closer to the dashboard, listening. Beneath the static, I heard something faint, distant, a voice. It wasn't speaking clearly, more like whispering through water, but I could make out fragments. Don't stop, keep driving. I jerked back, gripping the wheel tighter. My hands were slick with sweat. The headlights flickered once. Then again, in that brief flash, I saw something on the road ahead. A shape, human, standing perfectly still in the middle of the lane. I slammed the brakes. Tires screamed. The car lurched forward, stopped just short of the figure. My pulse thundered. For a moment I thought it was a trick of the light, but then it moved. Not toward me, just slightly, enough to tilt its head, like it was curious. I couldn't see its face, only the outline. The shape of shoulders, arms, and a faint shimmer where eyes should have been. I didn't wait. I hit the gas, swerving around it. When I looked in the rearview mirror, it was gone. But my reflection wasn't. In the mirror, my eyes were fixed on something behind me. My mouth moved, though I wasn't speaking. I didn't look back. I didn't want to know. I drove until dawn, until I finally reached a small roadside motel with flickering neon lights that read, "Vacancy." The man at the front desk didn't ask questions. He just handed me a key, said, "You look like you've seen a ghost." I almost laughed, but my throat was too dry. The room smelled like old cigarettes and rain-soaked carpet. There was a single bed, a dresser, and of course a mirror. I turned it to face the wall before I even sat down. Sleep came in fits. Every time I started to drift off, I'd hear it again. That whisper, that same soft voice asking, "Are you still there?" I woke to find the mirror turned back around. I don't remember moving it. My reflection smiled faintly, then tilted its head the other way, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. I spoke aloud, voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" No answer. Just that faint static sound again, filling the silence. Then, slowly, a word formed on the other side of the glass. Not spoken, written help. I froze. The letters began to fade, smudging like condensation on glass. Something inside me shifted then. Maybe curiosity, maybe sympathy, maybe fear pretending to be empathy. Whatever it was, I stepped closer. The surface of the mirror seemed to breathe, a faint pulse of light beneath it. I raised my hand. The glass was cold but not solid. It rippled under my touch, and then I saw them, faces, dozens of them swirling faintly within the reflection. Eyes open, mouths moving silently, all staring out from the other side. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. The faces vanished, leaving only my reflection again, except this time, I wasn't alone. Behind me stood that same shadowed figure from the road, closer now, its outline clearer. No features, just darkness in the shape of a man. I spun around. Nothing there. But when I looked back at the mirror, it was still behind me. Closer. The air in the room dropped to freezing. My breath fogged in front of me, and then faintly I heard it again, whispering from everywhere at once. Don't stop. Keep driving. I bolted from the room. Didn't even grab my bag. I just ran to the car and drove until the motel was nothing but a smear in the rearview mirror. I kept driving for hours, until sunlight finally broke over the horizon again. When I looked in the mirror this time, there were no tricks. Just me, pale, tired, eyes hollow. For a moment I thought it was over, that whatever had attached itself to me had been left behind with that motel. But as I drove past a stretch of empty forest road, the radio came alive again, static, and beneath it, the faint whisper I'd come to dread. Softer now, almost gentle. Don't stop. Keep driving. This time, though, it wasn't warning me. It was pleading, because when I finally glanced into the rearview mirror again, there was another reflection behind me. Not in the back seat, inside the mirror. I didn't think I'd ever go back. Not to the mountains, not to that road, not to the place that took everything from me. Sleep, peace, sense. But sometimes you don't get to choose what calls you home. It began again 3 nights ago. The whisper, not in mirrors this time, not in the radio, but right beside my bed. I'd been living in a small apartment in the city for months, surrounded by noise and people. I thought being among others would keep the silence away. But when I woke that night, it was the same voice. The same calm, measured tone. Are you still driving? I sat up so fast I almost fell out of bed. My heart thudded against my ribs like it was trying to escape. My room was empty, just the soft orange glow from the street lamp outside, slanting through the blinds. But on the wall opposite my bed, there was something new. A faint damp outline, the shape of a hand pressed flat against the paint. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. That's when I realized something worse. The mark wasn't on the wall. It was on the inside of the window. I packed before sunrise. I didn't know where I was going, only that staying wasn't an option. But the road led me where it always does, back toward the Appalachians, back toward the forest that seems to breathe even when the wind is still. As I drove deeper into the hills, my phone lost service. The GPS went gray, then black. I wasn't sure if I was following instinct or being led. The mountains rose around me like dark silhouettes, patient and watchful. Every turn of the road felt like a choice I didn't make. By the time I found the old dirt trail, I knew exactly where I was headed. The cabin, the trees there have a sound, not like ordinary wind through leaves. It's more coordinated, as if the forest is whispering in rhythm, words too old to recognize. I tried not to listen, but the longer I walked, the clearer it became. The sound wasn't around me. It was following me. When I reached the clearing, my stomach twisted. The cabin stood exactly as I'd left it, though it shouldn't have been there. The Forest Service had burned this place down years ago. I'd seen the report myself. Yet here it was, rebuilt, silent, waiting. The door creaked open before I even touched it. Inside, the air was thick and cold, like stepping underwater. Everything looked the same. My old suitcase, the same warped mirror, hung perfectly straight on the wall. The same faint scratches spiraling across its surface. I should have left. I should have turned around. But some part of me needed to understand, needed an ending, even if it wasn't the kind I could walk away from. I lit a single candle. Its flame wavered, though there was no wind. The silence pressed closer. "Why me?" I asked. My voice sounded too small, swallowed by the room. The mirror didn't answer. But the reflection shifted slightly. A fraction of a second delay between my movements and its own. Then the glass rippled once like a pond touched by rain, and there I was, not my reflection but me, standing inside the mirror. Eyes hollow, skin pale, watching. "Are you still driving?" the other me asked. I shook my head, unable to speak. He smiled, just barely. "Then you shouldn't have stopped." Behind him, in the depth of the glass, I could see the mountains, dark and endless, like they stretched beyond the reflection itself. Shapes moved between the trees, shadows or people. He stepped closer. So did I, though I didn't mean to. Every inch I moved forward, he moved backward, pulling me closer with him. The candle flickered and went out, and then I was inside. It didn't happen with sound or force. 1 second the room surrounded me. The next everything shifted. The colors, the air, even the way gravity felt. The world inside the mirror was dim, cold and stretched. Everything looked almost right, but wrong enough to make me dizzy. The cabin stood where it always had, but the trees outside swayed without wind. The sky above was gray, but it wasn't clouds. It was moving like water, and the whispering louder now. Dozens of voices layered together, rising and falling in a rhythm like breath. I turned in slow circles. "Where am I?" The voices answered in fragments. Not words exactly, just thoughts that pushed their way into my head. "You stopped driving. You looked too long. You stayed too still." I ran for the door, but when I opened it, there was nothing outside. Just reflection. Endless reflection, like standing in a hall of mirrors that stretched forever. Each one showed a version of me, walking, sleeping, screaming, silent. And behind every reflection someone watched. Not human, not alive. Just aware. One of them stepped forward. Its form was vague, fluid, but its eyes, they were my eyes. "You called us," it said without moving its mouth. "You listened when no one else did." "I didn't call anyone," I whispered. "You came back." I stumbled backward, shaking my head. "No, you brought me here." It tilted its head. "We only opened the door. You stepped through." Something in the air shifted then. The reflection of the candlelight from the other side of the mirror flickered faintly. For a moment I saw the real cabin beyond the glass. My body, still standing there, unmoving. I realized what they wanted. They didn't want to harm me. They wanted to replace me. I ran to the mirror, pounding on it, shouting, but my reflection just smiled. He raised his hand, pressing it against the other side of the glass. The sound echoed through the air, vibrating like a heartbeat. "Stay here," he whispered. "You'll be safer." The whispers around me grew louder, circling. The ground seemed to move, shifting like sand. I tried to pull away, but the world held me in place. The figure behind the glass, my reflection, stepped forward. The more he moved, the dimmer my side became. I screamed. The sound didn't carry. It just sank into the silence. Then, a flash. I was on the floor, back in the cabin, gasping for air. The mirror hung still on the wall, dark and cold. My reflection looked back at me, perfectly in sync. For a moment, I thought I'd escaped. I stumbled to my feet, laughing weakly, tears in my eyes. I grabbed my bag and bolted for the door. The morning light outside was gray but real. I stepped into it like surfacing from deep water. I didn't look back. I made it to my car, started the engine, and didn't stop until the mountains faded in my rearview mirror. But as the road flattened and the city skyline came into view, I caught a glimpse of something strange in the reflection. My rearview mirror showed the forest behind me, not the asphalt, not the highway. Just the trees, and standing in the clearing where the cabin had been was me, smiling. When I blinked, it was gone. The road looked normal again. I told myself I imagined it, the last trick of a sleepless mind. But when I got home, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I was pale, shaken, exhausted, but there was something else, a faint handprint on the glass. From the inside, that was 2 days ago. The whispers have stopped. The mirrors have stayed still. Everything's quiet now, too quiet. And tonight, as I sit here writing this, I can hear it again, faint, beneath the hum of the city, beneath the sound of my own breath, the whisper, keep driving. Only this time, it isn't outside me, it's coming from within. And as I glance toward the window, I see movement, not behind me, not outside, but in the reflection of the glass itself. Someone, or something, is standing just out of frame, waiting, watching, and when I finally gather the courage to look directly at it, I realize the truth. It isn't watching me, it's waiting for me to move. Because maybe I never left the mountains at all. Maybe I've been driving in circles ever since. Maybe I'm still inside and out there. In the reflection, something else